Ansi, for that introduction. As Ansi has said, I'm Nontombi Marule. I'm the Director of Innovation and Technology at the DTI. And I'm quite honored to be invited to this session because the fourth industrial revolution is kind of coming to us as a wave, and we are all trying to wrap our heads around what needs to be done, what we should be doing, and at the same time try and see what our status quo is, what are we capable of. So what I'm going to do today, because I did look at my DDG's presentation yesterday, and his point of view, where he was coming from, was more from the outcomes for approach, to say in terms of what we need to deliver on the jobs and the implications for the government, where are we with the fourth industrial revolution? And I tried not to go there. So one of the things that I like to do whilst I'm at the department, I like to call myself a street level bureaucrat. So if you'd allow me, what I've tried to do with my presentation is to go to that level. I'm not going to try and say, you know, what are the big plans we're doing, but I like to share with you what are the things that are in our radar that we are aware that we need to deal with. Some of them we are already working on them. Some of them are things that we still need input in terms of what we need to do. So I've tried to just take it a level lower so that then even on the ground with people like us who are in the field and supporting entrepreneurs and supporting technology development, we are clear of what is expected. And also I think because we are in a session like this, we then make it a discussion to say maybe yes, you must focus on this, maybe no, maybe think of it this way. So please take it with that pinch of salt. Okay, so what I'm going to try and in our own heads how we look at the building blocks, and also why do we care? Because now this fourth industrial revolution has become like a buzzword and we're excited about it, but it's something also at the same time that we recognize we can't quite ignore. What are the advantages? What are the implications? I want to go a little into the economic catch-up within which our, South Africa as a country is at, and try and look at it from that perspective to say, whilst we were still, trying to charge towards the third industrial revolution, we are on the fourth, and what do we do about it? And what then becomes our challenges, and I've tried to paint a picture of what the paradigm shift is supposed to be. This diagram, very famous, we all know. It tries to paint, where we're coming from and why we're here. And the building blocks of 4IR, you will see, goes around the Internet of Things, the cloud computing, big data, and these are the things that we're all familiar with. I'm not going to tell you about them. But at the same time, then what then becomes the implications? One of the things that's very huge with this 4IR is about 3D printing and personal fabrication. And as a department that drives industrialization, we try and ask questions to say what then becomes the implications. And some of the things that have been cited as issues is this notion of 4IR might be taking up, some of the traditionally known jobs, low-skilled jobs, and maybe replacing those with high-skilled. But how do we then, use this to our advantage in terms of, how do we use advanced manufacturing to advance our industrial base? Internet of Things and computing, how does that help? I try to look at that from the point of regulatory. If you think about how many databases each individual institution generates, how do we manage and how do we build a policy of things around Internet of Things and big data. Robotics, what then becomes the jobs of tomorrow. Then you go to also what artificial intelligence, machine learning, is it something that is in our immediate sphere? Is it something that we can do now? Big data, the data that we generate, how do we manage it? How do we regulate on it? How do we use it to our advantage? How do we share it, as we, generate it from different angles and points of view? And why we care is because eventually this phenomenon then has implications on our economy and has implications on our regulatory framework. So somehow, as people in this space, it's, as I've said before, it's not something that we can necessarily ignore. It's something that we have to think about it. And in the morning, one of the speakers at the CEO's session was saying, it's already here. And some of the things that we're thinking about now are things that we should have done 5 years ago. So, there's that catch in terms of what do we do now? What do we have to do? How do we respond? Are we agile enough to be able to respond? And also why we care is because this thing is coming to us at a speed of light. The changes, the things that we see on the market are at a speed that some of our regulatory or policy frameworks can't respond to it. And whilst we're still thinking about responding, it has changed. It's just like how technological advancements happen. The scope. Disruptions are such that you are not able to tell where is it going to come from. I mean, nobody saw Uber coming. When Uber was introduced, it was like an app. It was something that's very far from even our country because we would hear, but within a space of 18 months, it was here and it was fully fledged. And the transport departments did not know how to respond, and we all know the story of how that. And how does it impact on our systems? One of the speakers yesterday made a point around infrastructure and emphasizing that one of the things that we'll have to be very clear in terms of how we do it is infrastructure support. And this comes with systems impact. We no longer are doing business as we do every day. We need to be thinking out of the box. And we always say that, but I don't think we fully appreciate what out of the box thinking and acting is about. And also technology advances keep on expanding such that then, keeping up becomes an issue. Now, the advantage is, again, the things that this fourth industrial revolution is bringing to us are such that we like these things. We'd like them because then, in as much as they are sort of in our face, it's things that, they can assist in advancing our economy. So one of the things, the flexibility, the speed, the productivity, are things that we would like to bring forth and make sure that we know how to deal with them to an extent that it assists us to leapfrog and get to another level. And in terms of customer, again, from that session within the CEOs, they were talking about how in everything that we do, technology development, production, customer is at the center of everything that you do. Your solution have to be customer based because then you are sure of the market. Then after that, you are not moving around and saying, who then becomes my customer? If already when you were developing the technology, it was customer oriented. Okay, thank you. And production life cycles become shorter in terms of turnaround times. We can use robots, smart machines, and smart products that are able to communicate with one another. Now, as I've said before, one of the things that we have to realize is that South Africa is still a developing state. And one of the aspects that becomes centric to that is the fact that we have put catch-up strategies in place. But I wouldn't say we were successful in implementation. That's one. One of the things that the gentleman from, why am I forgetting this? This is from the CEO's meeting in the morning. You have to realize, as a characteristics of developed countries, is that money, VC, investment, follows the entrepreneur. So in Silicon Valley, in those kinds of environments, investors are the ones who are seeking the next best thing, which is not necessarily what happens in developing states. Technologists, people who are developing these technologies and innovators are the ones who are moving around with their inventions and seeking money. Now, if you look at the examples, what you call the 4 tigers, Asian tigers, that have done successful catch-up strategies, are the ones that somehow you'd like to look at their pattern and model what they have done, really. And you'll see that sooner or later, China and India are on the trail of making sure that they are advancing their catch-up strategies. Now, there are 2 things with catch-up. One is the economic catch-up and one is technological catch-up. And I feel that sometimes you're not going to be able to put one over the other, because technology is at the center of economic development, but at the same time, you can look at economic development, outside, technological advances. But all the Asian tigers have shown that technology is central to their strategy, to their catch-up strategies. Now, and what then becomes central, or the key factors to this catch-up strategies, are is technological specialization. One, around the cycle times, that we need to start looking at technologies that are going to make us leap, not from here and up. And I would like to think that in our country we have identified those. I mean, the work that we do around fuel cell technology development, around, I'm trying to think of some of the projects that we are implementing, where you already use the expertise that exists in the world in trying to ensure that then you don't, reinvent the wheel. But again, there's also a very important aspect where your specialization has to revolve around your degree of originality. Because if you are not using your own resources, your own people, your own thinking, your own problems to then be trying to advance, then your solutions become competitive to everybody else. Whereas if you're looking internally, then it becomes a much more, secular kind of form of a solution, where using your own strategies, you're solving your own problems. Now, and also, again, linked to the first one, the reliance on foreign technologies then renders us liable to those countries where the technologies have originated. One of the conversations we are having at the DTI, especially around technology development, is to say we no longer want to look at technologies that advance acquisition of technologies from overseas. Because one of the things that happens, an entrepreneur or an innovator will say, I want to use this kind of technology to integrate it or use it as a platform for what I want to do. But what tentatively happens is that they become heavily indented on that, the originator of the technology, and they never are able to, break free of that loop, and as such, now money sips away from the country in a sense of, licensing or however arrangement they have with the originators. I'm not saying we're going to stop doing it, but I'm saying those are the kinds of things that we're starting to see that we have to take care not to ensure that we don't build technologies based on foreign technologies, and we need to then start looking at our local content. And diversification versus concentrated growth strategies. What I liked about the session that we had yesterday, there was a gentleman that was sitting next to me from the CSIR and was saying what they are going to do is to write concept papers for 4IR which are sector specific. I like that because then it sort of gives you that vertical integration into each sector. It will take into context the kinds of advancements that we have done in the country, the level at which we're at, the level at which we can support that particular sector, and whatever it is at our disposal that is able to fast track us, and we are able to then come up with solutions that are specific. And you're not then coming up with such a broad framework in terms, and that can be applicable to specific sectors. So I kind of like that, because then you are making sure that in whatever sector or whatever area of influence, you're looking into its particular contextual aspects. I don't know if that makes sense. Now, what you will then realize is that our status quo right now, in terms of our production industries, we still are, I don't see this thing working. Okay. We still are looking at this. Our industries are still predominantly locked in that sphere of the second revolution. But you'll see our services in terms of banking and our consultancies have moved slightly a bit, and we can have some form of learning there. But then what this slide is trying to say is that then how do you then bridge that gap? If our production industries that we rely on for our economic development strategies are still there and have not even fully been integrated in the third revolution. Now, implications for government. One is about the agility of us to the changing world. It has been overhammered. Our policies and our strategies are not agile enough. But how then do we also increase R&D investment in disruptive technologies? This we have been doing for quite some time. I mean, the implementations around strategies around nanotechnologies, your photonics, your emerging research areas has started as early as 2005, 2006. And we'd like to think that 10 years later, we are sort of closer to optimizing on the investments that we did then. And how then also do we, put in place regulatory frameworks that are conducive to using homegrown technologies? Earlier on, we were, as the DTI, we hosted a session around grassroots innovators or innovation, grassroots innovation. One of the position of the DTI is to say, as you are looking at township and rural economies, and with the advancements of innovation strategies, is to say, how do you then ensure that the society is embedded and bring their own solutions in their own environment? But then our regulatory framework has to respond to that. It doesn't need to be, what can I say, a high-tech oriented approach. And these are the conversations we are beginning to have. development of standards and devices in terms of complying. I mean, a lot of technology developers have indicated that the standards fraternity within the country is not responsive, especially to new technologies. So these are the things that are in our radar and we're looking at. Skilled people. I mean, we know that's one of the things that are central to this 4IR. Labor laws that attract a talented workforce, and how do we deal with high costs of connectivity and low bandwidth speeds. The last one is also a point that I'm repeating that came very strongly from yesterday's conversation. To say if we are not starting there, because this 4IR, one of its building blocks is digitalization and connectivity, we need to be, it will sound like we're not serious about what we're trying to do. Okay. Now, when you, for the regulators, now this is one, because my talk was looking at the industrialization and regulatory framework. Now, as I've said already, different regulatory bodies generate a lot of data. If you think about, I mean, the GTI, for instance, you have the liquor board there, you have the gambling board, all these kinds of regulatory bodies. Data is becoming the next big currency, where in this digital revolution, you know, data is going to become like electricity that we trade in. Now, one of the challenges for the regulator is capacity and capability to handle this data. You know, earlier on this year, we had a session around commercialization and IP and technology commercialization. And one of the things that we're having among different departments, for example, NIPMO, CIPC, TIA, DST, and DTI, was to say on all the technology developers that we fund and all the, you know, IP that's developed, how do you then come into a space where you have one database that, you know, handles all these queries? And an issue of maybe having a data strategy was something that was proposed. And again, it was repeated yesterday to say, especially when you're looking at it from the government front, that some of these things need not be repeated elsewhere, but we can integrate them such that then we are able to work together. Skilled labor, again, adequate tools for manipulation and interpretation, and also, again, as I've said, networks in terms of sharing and mobility. Now, as we're dealing with big data as well, one of the things that we'll have to seriously look at is flows and fluidity of this data, because data can be manipulated. Who then has access, who then shares it, who then manages, who then, you know, so all those things. And how do we then also protect it? Because once you have generated it, and ensuring that the correct trends are being extracted or extrapolated from this data is done. So as we're trying to think of this data strategy, one of the things we'll have to make sure is encourage and enabling sharing, but at the same time, limit monopoly. Now, in terms of paradigm shift, I'm not going to go through all of them, but in terms of policy, we need to be futuristic and be very agile. In terms of labor, it's reskilling and adequate human capital development. Yeah, so this was like, the summary to say these are the main, I'm not saying they're the only, but I mean, that needs our immediate attention. And especially the last one where you're talking about the 360 degree perspective on the society, because up to so far, most of our technological advancement have been done sometimes for, but not with, you know, so the society. So those are the kinds of things that we have to change about moving forward. And there's a guy with a burning question.